Ashes to Gold. The Journey of Emil Hartmann. Part 1. The Draft Notice. Emil Hartmann was 23 when the letter arrived. A cold March wind howled through the narrow streets of his hometown, a soot-colored village pressed between the Bavarian hills. Emil had never been anything remarkable. He failed at school, lacked the coordination for sport, and stumbled awkwardly through life like a boy wearing shoes too big for him. His father, a cobbler, once said, "The only thing Emil can stitch is a mess." The letter bore the seal of the Imperial German Army. He read it with shaking hands. "By order of His Majesty, you are to report for military service effective immediately." His stomach twisted. War. The Great War, as the newspapers were already calling it. Men had marched off singing, but many returned as ghosts. Or not at all. Emil was not brave. He was not strong. He couldn't even swat a fly without flinching. His mother wept quietly that night, folding his clothes and whispering prayers to saints she no longer believed in. Emil sat on the edge of his childhood bed, staring at the draft notice like it was a death certificate. He did not feel anger or courage. He only felt fear. But the next morning, he packed his bag, kissed his mother's trembling hand, and walked into the unknown. The train was packed with boys pretending to be men. Emil sat wedged between a farmer's son who smelled of hay and a red-haired boy who wouldn't stop talking about medals and glory. The rhythm of the train tracks was relentless, clack, 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 like a war drum that didn't care for the names of those it was carrying to the front. He clutched his knapsack to his chest like a shield. Outside the window, the countryside blurred. Fields, forests, towns, then more fields. But the blur in his mind was worse. Memories, fears, imagined wounds, the silent question, will I die? The farmer's son vomited in his boots. The red-haired boy sang a marching song until his voice cracked. No one joined him. Emil didn't speak. He didn't know what to say. What words could explain the weight in his chest, the fog in his thoughts? He wasn't built for this. He didn't want to shoot, bleed, scream. He wanted to go back to fixing shoes and feeding stray cats behind his father's shop. But he also knew there was no way back. The train chugged on, carrying 1,000 boys toward something far too big for them to understand. The first battle was chaos. There was no glory, no strategy, just mud, noise, and screaming. Emil had barely learned to hold his rifle properly before he was thrown into a trench with the others, his uniform still smelling of fresh linen. The sky was constantly roaring. Shells rained from above like falling gods, each one tearing earth and man apart alike. The air reeked of sweat, blood, and gunpowder. Somewhere nearby, someone was always crying. Emil didn't fire his weapon for the first 3 days. He simply held it, crouched in the mud, his hands shaking so violently he could barely keep his fingers wrapped around it. The officer shouted at him once, then didn't bother again. He wasn't brave. He wasn't useful. He was just there. One night, during a lull, he saw a man's hand sticking out of the earth beside him. He didn't know whose it was. Maybe a Frenchman. Maybe one of their own. He reached out and touched it. It was still warm. Something broke in him then. Not loudly. Quietly. Like a thread snapping deep in the soul. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just stopped waiting for someone to save him. That night, he cleaned his rifle. Not for glory. But because he finally understood, he would have to survive on his own. The bullet struck Emil in the shoulder during a confused skirmish near Ypres. It wasn't dramatic. One moment he was running. The next, he was face first in the mud, with a burning pain crawling through his chest like fire made of needles. He thought he was dying. He lay there for hours. The battle moved on. Bodies surrounded him. Some moaned. Some didn't. When night came, the wind howled over the corpses like it mourned them. Then, light. Lanterns. Voices. A stretcher. He drifted in and out of consciousness, the world nothing but flickers of pain and motion. He remembered someone saying, "He's still breathing," and the sound of boots sloshing through blood-soaked mud. But what he remembered most was her voice. Software steady, like water over stones. He'll live. The hospital was a tent, sagging with damp and despair. Emil woke to the smell of antiseptic and rot. His wound was bandaged. He couldn't lift his arm. And there she was. The nurse. Slender, tired eyes. Auburn hair tied back in a loose knot. A red cross on her sleeve. She looked like no one he had ever seen. Or maybe, he thought, everyone he had ever needed. She noticed him staring. "You're lucky," she said quietly in German. 3 inches lower, and we'd be writing your mother. He tried to smile. It hurt. "Danke," he whispered. She didn't smile back, but she didn't leave either. Days passed. Then weeks. His shoulder healed slowly, but something else inside him began to stir faster. Her name was Lotta. She wasn't like the girls back home, those who whispered and giggled and made boys feel like fools. Lotta moved with purpose, with quiet strength. She stitched wounds without flinching, changed bandages in silence, and only spoke when necessary. But when she did, Emil listened. He learned her voice before he learned her past. A low, calming tone, like a melody hummed under breath. Sometimes, when the pain was too sharp to sleep, she'd sit by his cot and speak to him. Not about the war, but about her brother who died in the first month, about her childhood near Leipzig, about a dog she once had named Bruno, who used to follow her everywhere. Emil listened not as a patient, but as a man starved for something good. In return, he told her stories too, about his father's workshop, about how he once glued a customer's shoe shut by accident, about the alley cats who waited behind the shop every evening. One night, during a rainstorm, lightning cracked the sky, and the tent shuddered. Emil, half asleep, muttered, "Are you afraid?" She shook her head. I'm too tired to be." Then she looked at him for a long time. "You're not like the others. Because I'm a coward?" "No," she said softly. "Because you still feel things." And for the first time in months, Emil felt something other than fear. The hospital tent became a strange kind of world, one untouched by gunfire, where time moved differently, more slowly. Outside, men killed and died. Inside, Emil healed and fell. Not dramatically, not all at once, but like snow melting, silently, inevitably, he fell for Lotta. Yet he said nothing. What words could carry the weight of what he felt? He was a soldier, barely alive. She was a nurse, carrying grief like a second heart. And war was no place for softness. Still, something bloomed in the silences between them, like the way her hand lingered a moment longer when she passed him a cup of water, or the time she laughed, truly laughed, when he told her he once tried to sew a boot and ended up stitching it to his pants. That night, he couldn't sleep. He stared at the canvas ceiling, listening to the rain tap softly above him. He wasn't brave. Not yet. But he began to wonder what courage might feel like. Not the kind that charges into battle, but the kind that lets you say what you truly mean, even when you're terrified. One evening, after the sun had dipped low and the tent was painted in gold and shadow, Emil asked, "What will you do after the war?" Lotta didn't answer at first. Then she said quietly, "If I survive, I want to forget, but I don't think I ever will." Neither of them said anything more that night, but something shifted. Not loudly, not in words, just in the way they looked at each other after that.